Hey guys, so I just got done working on my pool pump here. I was having some issues, found this little guy sitting in there. I'm gonna go ahead and show you what that means and why I recommend you consider looking at your pump if you're having similar issues that I was facing.
Alright, so I've got a pool pump that you can see here has bubbles that continue to swirl around in the lid here, producing a bit of cavitation, almost like a gravelly sound to it. And I've also noticed a bit of reduced flow back to the pool, and that's my bigger concern because flow rate going to the pool is key in being able to keep the water clean. Usually when we're seeing bubbles in here, that's often a sign that we've got something going on the suction side. That could be the skimmer, could be the drain, it could even be piping fittings or a pore seal along the lid. So we're going to go ahead and investigate this and try to eliminate those bubbles. Sometimes if your pump is sucking in a lot of air and you're seeing large air bubbles in your basket, you'll sometimes see those bubbles present on the returns. For our situation, not really seeing the air bubbles here at the returns, but we're still going to go ahead and try to troubleshoot and figure out how to eliminate those bubbles. So one of the easiest things to check for if you're trying to eliminate those bubbles is make sure you've got enough water in the pool, that you're not sucking in air at the skimmer. I've got water flowing through. I'm not pulling the water all the way down where I am sucking air in. And we can see here on the face of the filter plate, we've got the arrow. We're pretty much right at the mark there. So from our standpoint, low water level is not really a concern. The other thing to check for when you're looking at your skimmer, just make sure it's not blocked, that you're allowing water to flow freely down through the skimmer back to the pump. If you've got a big object in here, sometimes that can inhibit flow, where then you may actually start sucking in air. So another area you'll just want to make sure isn't clogged up is your basket in your pump housing. So I'm going to go ahead, open up the lid here. We can see here, this isn't too bad. While you have the lid off, this is a good time to inspect your O-ring on the lid itself. Make sure it looks like it's intact without any cracks or degradation here, because that's also an area that's prone to leakage. As the pump is pulling water through, it may also allow leakage of air into the basket. This would also be a good time to apply a bit of lubricant onto the O-ring here, just to make sure you get a nice seal as you apply the lid back onto the housing here. And then staying with the pump here, it's worth looking at our plug at the bottom of the basket here. This is also on the suction side. We just want to make sure the O-ring here is intact without any degradation or cracking. Looks good. Beyond just a visual inspection, you could get some soapy, bubbly water and rub it along these connections here, run your pump, and if you see those bubbles being sucked inwards towards the pump, that's an indication that you've got a leak there. So another area that can contribute to the air bubbles, the pump itself and the internal components. There's an impeller in here, and we have actually, over the course of years, had smaller debris kind of skip through our basket here in the pump and clog up the impeller, and that can cause the cavitation. It can reduce flow back to the pool. So we're going to go ahead and disassemble the dry end from the wet end of our pump here. And what I've got is a stay right pump. It's got a band clamp here that holds those two pieces together, and it's pretty easy to disassemble here so that we can get to the impeller and check it out. So because our pump sits below the level of our pool surface, as soon as we open up the pump, we're going to get a backflow of water through here, and it's just going to continue to flow out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate our pump by closing off our inlet valve, closing off our outlet valve, so now we don't have a flow of water that's going to come rushing through our pump as we open it up And if you don't have ability to close off your inlet, there are rubber plugs that you can purchase that you can essentially slide into your inlet of the pump housing here. And there's usually a wing nut that allows you to really get a nice good seal to prevent water from continuing to flow out. So to disassemble our pump, we're simply gonna take this band clamp and unthread it. So I really did a poor job of backwashing my filter recently and had a lot of the media spew out everywhere, so it's a little messy here. But I've got a bolt on the underside of my pump here that's kind of anchoring it into our concrete pad. Just gonna go ahead and loosen this up because we're gonna have to be able to pull the motor away from the wet end of the pump here. Then I'm just gonna take our bonding wire and remove that off the pump. And so with the breaker for our pump turned off here, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of slide it out of there. And we can see all that water coming through. We've got our gasket here that goes between the wet side and dry side of the pump. Looks to be in pretty good condition, and I can actually still feel some of the lubricant still on it. This here is the diffuser plate. We've got the O-ring here that inserts into the wet end of the pump. Then inside our diffuser plate, we've got our impeller that spins. Maybe kind of hard to see, but I'm seeing some debris kind of caught in the impeller there. So we're gonna go ahead and clean this out. I'm actually gonna take off the diffuser plate. There's just a handful of screws. I can use a flathead so that I can really do a good inspection. Good thing I took the diffuser plate off, because just looking at the impeller here, I can see a couple of pebbles and stones that are embedded in here. So the way this works is the water is being sucked through here and being flung out the impeller here, which then goes back to the filter. And so the gravelly sound I was hearing, the bubbles, I'm suspecting are attributed to some of this debris that I'm seeing inside our impeller. Looks like there's even some plastic sitting in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and now use my needle nose pliers and just try and dislodge what's in there. Feels like it's in there pretty good. Actually, flathead screwdriver is working better. Trying to get that out. Here's one pebble that just fell out as I'm trying to get this plastic out of here. So one note with the pumps, it's not only the horsepower of the motor, but even your impeller sizing here, that affects flow rate. So in some cases you can actually upsize your impeller to give you more flow out of the same motor. So just something to consider there. There's that rock that was wedged in the impeller fins. Here's a chunk of something. It looks like a plant or a flower that was wedged in there. So everything that I'm pulling out of here is stuff that's made it by our skimmer and our pump basket. Kind of what I'm seeing here is this blue piece might actually be the largest restriction out of everything I've seen here. There it goes. Alright, so just a piece of plastic that kind of fit perfectly in between one of those fins there in the impeller. So there's essentially 6 ports within this impeller here that the water is getting sucked through. and this was blocking one of them for the most part. So if this were taking up about 15 to 20% of the flow capacity here, that definitely can make a big difference in the overall efficiency of the pump. So now that we have our impeller nice and cleared out, I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall the diffuser plate. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get the pump reassembled now with the O-ring. Just gonna add a little bit of our Jack's lubricant here. Just kind of rub that around. This lubricant will help extend its life, prevent cracking, and help give it a nice seal as it goes between the pump and the motor. Now we're just gonna reinsert our O-ring back into the groove there on the pump. And we're gonna carefully mate the motor back up with the pump. Got our band clamp here to piece them back together. So sometimes it's a little tricky just to be able to get the threaded bolt from the clamp to go through the insert here. So sometimes I like just to take a rubber mallet and gently tap the clamp. So here I've got a little bit of the bolt now exposed. So now we can take our nut and just kind of get it started. So as we're tightening it down, we can gently tap the band. We want to make sure we've got a nice tight seal here between the motor and the pump head. Otherwise we'll end up with leaking as we turn the pump back on. Feels pretty tight. Gonna go ahead and get our bonding strap re-secured here to the motor. And we'll get that re-anchored and then we'll kick everything back on. All right, got the pump reassembled here. Gonna open up our valves. After letting our pump run a few minutes here, it is significantly quieter. I still see maybe a few bubbles swirling up at the top of the lid there, but nothing like what it was. The noise is much better. And after finding that blue plastic in my impeller there, I took a closer look at our basket, was trying to figure out how something like that could have slipped through. These are pretty small holes, and I kind of realized it's my fault here. A lot of times when I seat our basket back into the housing here, I just kind of drop it in place and it just kind of maybe floats there. What I really should do is I should line up the notches that are inside the housing so that that basket seats down, and then I should lock it in place. That way I've got a nice tight fit in there. It's not going to be loosey-goosey, allow things to slip through as much. And so hopefully this will prevent future occurrence of debris getting through. Beyond the noise reduction at the pump, really the best benefit I'm going to get is an increase in flow rate from the returns here. I just measured it and I'm getting about 25% more flow coming out of our returns here. I used a pool noodle to measure it. I had taken a reading just yesterday after cleaning out our filter, and now I've got another reading after cleaning out our impeller and getting about 14.5 gallons per minute out of this return compared to 11.5 gallons per minute prior to cleaning out the impeller. Pretty amazing, and that right there is going to allow us to achieve higher turnover rate of water in the pool, which means I could actually just run the pump a bit less, save a little money there. So definitely, if you suspect that you're getting decreased flow out of your returns, seeing bubbles in the pump, hearing kind of that gravelly noise in the pump, definitely investigate, check your skimmer flow, check for leaks on the suction side.
Otherwise, in our case, it actually ended up being some debris caught in the impeller that was restricting flow. And even without measuring the flow with the pool noodle, just sticking my hand in front of this return, I can just feel how much more power and force is coming out of here. So I definitely can feel the difference in flow rate, and then able to measure it with the pool noodle. If you want to know how I measure flow rate with the pool noodle, go ahead and check out the link below for more details.